Every culture praises virtue. We look up to virtuous men and women as the example. They make us want to imitate their actions so we can be like them. But what is virtue? What makes a person virtuous? Is being virtuous simply choosing to do the good thing over the bad, or is it more complicated than that? These were questions which very long ago were addressed, but hold true to us even today with little change. This video will focus specifically on the discussion of virtue by Greek philosopher Aristotle in his book, the Nicomachean Ethics. Aristotle begins his discussion by distinguishing what virtue actually is. Firstly, he identifies two different kinds of virtue. Virtue, then, is of two kinds, intellectual and moral. Intellectual virtue owes both its inception and its growth chiefly to instruction, and for this very reason needs time and experience. Moral goodness, on the other hand, is the result of habit. To better understand this distinction, some examples of intellectual virtue would be wisdom and prudence, while examples of moral virtue would be liberality and temperance. This distinction pushes us towards what Aristotle posits as the definition of virtue in general. As we read, to obtain virtue, we need both to be taught it and to make it a habit. Therefore, virtue is not a singular thing one chooses or not, but rather it is a state of character that one possesses through development of self. More specifically, it is the perfection of character. No one is born virtuous or vicious. One chooses to act in a certain way that defines who they are as a person. This leads to how Aristotle broadly defines virtue. He says, virtue, then, is a state of character concerned with choice, lying in a mean, that is, the mean relative to us. This being determined by reason, and by that reason, by which the man of practical wisdom would determine it. Or to put it more simply, virtue is a mean between two vices, one of excess and one of deficiency. This follows naturally into the next point. Virtue is not an emotion, but rather a trained disposition that guides how we properly respond to emotions. For example, to feel fear is natural, but in how we respond to fear is what makes us either cowardly, courageous, or reckless. So, how do we guide this development of the self towards virtue? This is where Aristotle elaborates his doctrine of the mean. In this doctrine, Aristotle expands his point that virtue lies in between two extremes, the excess and the deficiency. Using the example above, to be cowardly would be the deficiency, to be courageous would be the mean, and to be reckless would be the excess. This mean is not something fixed throughout all situations, but rather is the mean relative to us, determined by our reason and wisdom. But not every action has an excess or deficiency. Some actions are necessarily always evil or vicious, such as murder or adultery. So then, how do we grow in virtue? To put it quite bluntly, by being virtuous. It's a rather funny answer, but something you see applied to many skills in this world. To use a personal example, I like to rock climb quite a bit, and people often ask, how do you get better at climbing? And do you know what the answer is that's often given by the best climbers in the world? Simply by climbing more. Aristotle reinforces this idea, saying the following: anything that we have to learn to do, we learn by the actual doing of it. People become builders by building, and instrumentalists by playing instruments. Similarly, we become just by performing just acts, temperate by performing temperate ones, brave by performing brave ones. He further emphasizes the importance of habituation, even from very early on, saying, so it is a matter of no little importance what sort of habits we form from the earliest age. It makes a vast difference, or rather, all the difference in the world. But because every situation is different, there is the real emphasis on practical wisdom, what Aristotle calls phronesis. This wisdom will aid us to judge situations correctly, determine which action is appropriate, and apply moral principles to real life. It must be understood that without practical wisdom, virtue cannot be perfected. So, how about we put some of this into practice? and learn what sort of actions we can choose to make us virtuous people, avoiding both the excess and the deficiency. Luckily for us, there's a whole table of this scale for 12 different virtues. The table is organized as such. For each section, there is a sphere of action or feeling. To use the courage example from above, the sphere would be fear and confidence. And for each sphere of action are listed the excess, the deficiency, and the mean we should strive for. In the interest of growing our phronesis, as Aristotle says, we will go through each one. The first sphere is that of pleasure and pain. The excess is licentiousness, the mean is temperance, and the deficiency is insensibility. The licentious, or overindulgent person, is someone who uses pleasure as the guiding principle of life. They overeat, drink to the point of drunkenness, and allow desire to rule them, pursuing pleasure even when reason warns against it. The insensible person is the opposite extreme. They reject all forms of pleasure, even natural and healthy pleasures, because they view all enjoyment as something to be avoided. The temperate person enjoys naturally ordered and moderated pleasure in accordance with reason. They never let pleasure take primacy over reason, and they stop when it is appropriate. The next sphere is referred to as getting and spending, minor. The excess is prodigality, the mean is liberality, and the deficiency is illiberality. Prodigality, a word many people might recognize from the famous parable of the prodigal son, is someone who recklessly spends their money with no regard to whether it is reasonable. The illiberal or stingy person, on the other hand, is someone who clings too tightly to money, even when spending it would be justified. For example, if their friend is having a fundraiser for a sick family member, and they could easily afford to donate but refuse. The liberal person gives and spends appropriately, neither hoarding wealth nor throwing it away, treating wealth instead as a tool for good. The next sphere is getting and spending, major. The excess is vulgarity, the mean is magnificence, and the deficiency is pettiness. The vulgar person spends too much in an effort to show off wealth rather than being someone noble, flashing gold and luxury, and flaunting excessive displays of wealth. The petty person spends too little when something calls for a grand display, such as cutting as many costs as possible when funding an important occasion. The magnificent person spends large sums appropriately. For example, a wealthy person funding a new gym for the community with state of the art facilities. The next sphere is honor and dishonor, major. The excess is vanity, the mean is magnanimity, and the deficiency is pusillanimity. The vain person claims honors greater than they deserve, seeking praise without possessing the greatness that justifies it. The pusillanimous person underestimates their worth, refusing honors due to them. For example, a highly educated scholar rejecting a leadership position they deserve out of self doubt. The magnanimous person rightly recognizes their self worth, pursuing noble deeds without arrogance or insecurity. The next sphere is honor and dishonor, minor. The excess is ambition, the mean is proper ambition, and the deficiency is lack of ambition. The ambitious, or overly ambitious person pursues honor and promotion relentlessly, craving the recognition more than the achievement itself. The unambitious person constantly refuses promotions or leadership positions, despite being the best person for the job, simply because they do not care. The person with proper ambition is someone who works diligently, accepting promotion when appropriate, and pursues excellence without being consumed by status or recognition. The next sphere is anger. The excess is irascibility, the mean is patience, and the deficiency is lack of spirit. The irascible person lets anger control them, getting angry too easily, intensely, or for too long. Their anger overwhelms what is reasonable for the situation. The apathetic person, or person who lacks spirit, fails to activate righteous anger. For example, if they witness a vulnerable person being harassed and feel indifferent to it. The patient or gentle person becomes angry when it is proper to do so, but they keep their anger under the guidance of reason, ensuring it remains under control. The next sphere is self expression. The excess is boastfulness, the mean is truthfulness, and the deficiency is understatement. The boastful person exaggerates their abilities or achievements in order to gain admiration or prestige, often lying or inflating claims. The understanding person, or a person who self deprecates, is someone who intentionally downplays their abilities or achievements. An example of this would be if an expert musician tells someone who asks them if they play guitar, "Sometimes, I'm not very good though." A truthful person simply represents themselves accurately. The next sphere is conversation. The excess is buffoonery, the mean is wittiness, the deficiency is boorishness. The buffoon constantly tries to be funny, even when their methods or the situation is highly inappropriate. They are loud and overly aggressive with their humor. Pranksters and TikTokers come to mind. The boorish person is someone who is always straight faced, stiff, and never allows even mild, harmless jokes to let them crack a smile. The witty person uses their reason to judge when humor is appropriate and tasteful to the situation at hand. The next sphere is social conduct. The excess is flattery, the mean is friendliness, and the deficiency is quarrelsomeness. The person who overly flatters constantly agrees with everyone, even when they themselves actually disagree, seeking approval from everyone and prioritizing it over honesty. The quarrelsome person is the exact opposite, seeking to create rifts or arguments in every situation, being an exceptionally difficult person to get along with, as they create conflict even over simple situations. The friendly person is someone who listens and gives their opinion respectfully, knowing how to be agreeable without sacrificing truthfulness when it is necessary. The next sphere is shame. The excess is shyness, the mean is modesty, and the deficiency is shamelessness. The shy person feels shame even when they have done nothing wrong, often hiding from the public eye out of misplaced fear. The shameless person feels absolutely no embarrassment or remorse for their behavior, even when they are obviously in the wrong. The modest person is not afraid to admit wrong, but is also not afraid to do the right thing. They let reason judge their appropriate action. For example, a student deciding not to cheat on a test because such an action would be shameful. Finally, we have the sphere of indignation. The excess is envy, the mean is righteous indignation, and the deficiency is malicious enjoyment. The envious person feels pain when others succeed, being consumed by jealousy and dislike, even when others deserve success. The malicious enjoyer takes pleasure in watching people fail simply for the enjoyment of it, or because they detest a person or group of people. The person with righteous indignation feels displeasure when someone receives undeserved success, with their concern being not jealousy, but justice. Well, that was a lot, but it provides us with a lot of valuable food for thought as we ponder how to become more virtuous people and choose the right action in every situation. As we see throughout the different spheres of action, virtue, according to Aristotle and Greek philosophy in general, is about perfect harmony and balance in nature and the person. The mean represents perfection, and we can achieve this perfection through the development of our practical wisdom and our habituation towards choosing what is right.